Okay, Wutang Qigong, going deep. Introduction. In the above, I have talked about Qigong, about what it is, what it is not, whether you and I are talking about the same thing, and so on. But mainly we have talked. Now we are going to the actual exercise of the Wutang Qigong that we practice. First of all, it is very important to realize that Qigong is like an onion. It has many, many layers. Every layer is equally valid, and yes, every layer has to coincide exactly with all the other layers. However, there is one difference with an actual onion. There is no logic in the order of the layers. One person might be able to feel things, while somebody else does not really feel yet, but is really, really good with copying the moves, or with understanding the theory behind it all. Everybody starts at a different door and follows a different path. My point is, practicing Qigong is a process, and it is impossible for me to cover the details of all of the layers, and there we go, of all of the layers that there are, partly because there are too many of them. Partly also because, as I've previously explained, my path, the path that I have followed, is not necessarily where or how you are traveling. So, if you have an experience that I do not describe, then it still is equally valid. It doesn't matter, do not worry about that, and most assuredly, do not feel like you are missing out. These are my experiences, and it is very well possible that you follow a different path, with different experiences, or with only a few of them. Again, it doesn't matter. Just enjoy your practice, as Qigong is not a goal in itself, but a path leading to the next step. There is no need to count all of the stones. Anyway, if you have read my books and followed my classes, then you are already familiar with the path that my personal development has followed. First, physical precision, or the essentials. Then, breaking the details of movement down into conceptual ideas that I have come to refer to as the external and internal principles. Then, going back to the Qigong exercises in order to relearn them with the newly found experiences and studying the results. I will try to follow the same building blocks in the explanation of every exercise. As the mental aspect is the same throughout all of the exercises, I will explain this in the following separate chapter and leave it out when I cover each exercise in detail. The mental aspect. First of all, you have to understand that there is no such thing as Qigong. When you and I practice, we practice two different things. This, of course, is because of the differences of experience that we put into our exercise. Also, the things we seek with Qigong are different. I admit that once I was searching for more power, but now I am at the point that I just practice. I notice that other people also are seeking something, maybe power as well, or health, or feeling good. So what we experience greatly depends on the want and need that we put into our practice. Yes, up to a certain level, we only improve on what we have and are not capable of experiencing beyond what we already know. Of course, the people of old knew very well that we can only practice what we already understand. So internal training as a whole is subdivided into different disciplines. Neidan, or internal alchemy, is the eventual goal of our practice. But not many people are up to this in this lifetime. Maybe in the next, but not now. The practice of Neidan is actually quite simple, as there are no complicated methods. Do not let yourself be fooled by the master booksellers of this world. Zhuangzi explains that all you have to do is sitting until you forget that you exist. And that is all there is to it. But who of us is capable of doing such a simple thing? Don't we all have excuses like, but I have to make a living, or but I need the exercise, it makes me feel good, but this, but that. We are not head people, we are not even heart people. We are but people and we are full of shit. Always excuses to not grow. So, whilst in Neidan practice, you try to dissolve the self and become immortal as a pure soul. More earthly spin-offs do exist. There are the health exercises, a category which can be subdivided into Yangtze, Daoyin, qigong and others. Then there are the training methods who want earthly gain from heavenly practice. These we call Neigung, and they use the physical effects of the Neidan training for tricks in order to amaze others or the self. Here we find the fire makers, the practitioners of the iron vest, and so on. It is a phase you're going through or get stuck in and get addicted to. Then there is the last development in the line, qigong. I have already talked extensively on what it is and what it does. One thing that all these approaches to internal training have in common, besides working with qi, is that they have to train the mind. Now, as is written in the old Chinese medical book, Huang Di Neijing Suwen, the qi follows the yi. Let's keep it relatively simple and translate yi with mind or awareness. And then it means that the qi goes where our mind, our awareness goes. Yes, this does mean, it means that if you pay attention to an injury, you make it worse. This is because when qi accumulates, it stagnates. And stagnations can be felt as a pain or a discomfort. But it is a good thing as well, because by nature we direct our awareness to an injury, and then the qi will follow, accumulate, and create a stagnation. And this is exactly what you want to happen. Since qi is the mover of the blood, you will bleed from the injury, which in fact cleans the wound. And the accumulation of qi will create a stagnation, a crust, so that you don't bleed out. Beautiful, no? The mind goes to where it hurts and the system takes care of all the rest. But now in our case, we are trying to allow qi to flow freely in order to achieve immortality. Do our earthly trick or just stay healthy. Why would you want to train the mind? Again, because the qi follows the yi. By now we know that if we want the qi to flow freely, then we must first get rid of the stagnations. This is where the mind comes into play. Is it not so that we are always thinking of 10,000 things at almost the same time? That means not only that we become restless in our head, it also means that the qi shoots here, it shoots there, shoots everywhere, not only moving freely at all, but at the same time creating tiny stagnations all over the place. Thinking is bad for us. So we have to quiet the mind. Throughout the centuries, 3 methods to quiet the mind have survived the test of time. There is no best one. It's just a matter of which one you encounter, prefer, or have chosen. The first one is a basic rule in qigong. Focus on your breath. Become the breath. The second one is called Isho Dantian. The I guards the Dantian. And the third one has no name as far as I know. It is a natural method where you just think your thoughts and eventually the mind gets exhausted and stops all by itself. Some schools tell you to focus on the thoughts, others will tell you to let them go. Again, there is no difference in quality, only in personal preference. In my school, we use the Isho Dantian method. The reason for this is because we are a martial arts school and Isho Dantian has its own value in the fighting arts. The third method I mentioned, the natural way, takes way too long. The Isho Dantian method is somewhere in the midst of these two. It is the in-between. What is, how do you do Isho Dantian? In Isho Dantian, we try to bring our awareness into our abdomen and at a later stage into our Dantian. In that later stage, which is a higher level, it's all about consolidating the E, making it a whole instead of a scattered E that it is in general. But that is for when we are almost immortal. For now, Isho Dantian is actually mainly a physical process in the sense that we work with physical sensations in order to achieve this. There are 3 physical sensations we need to be aware of. The first one is, of course, the abdomen. We must be able to feel it. In order to achieve this, we have to relax the abdomen and, well, be aware of it, feel it. At the beginner stage, it will feel a bit like we've just eaten something. The second sensation to be aware of is our body. Or, more exact, we do not want to be aware of it. This means that we have to understand how to position ourselves in such a manner that we do not feel our body. Well, apart from the legs, of course. But, practically spoken, it means that we shape ourselves like a factory chimney, where the top of the head feels like opened up to heaven, and the soles of our feet, if we're standing, or our butt if we're sitting, feel like if we are connecting to earth. The third sensation to be aware of is the physical aspect of our mind. If we pay attention to it, then we can actually feel the tension in our head when the mind is busy. So now we have a foundation. The abdomen, or the dantian. We have a chimney pipe, our body. And we have a clog, a stagnation, high up in that pipe. By relaxing the muscles at the side of the face, it is possible to feel how that sensation of tension inside dissolves. This is often described as listen to the back of your head. Now try to allow that sensation of dissolving to sink down through the neck and into the upper chest. The trajectory is actually the most difficult part. Once you're there, allow the sensation of openness and of lightness in the head, as this is how it will feel, to sink down into the abdomen or dantian, and keep it there for as long as you can, which will be about a quarter of a second, after which you start all over again. You will find that this Isho Dantian practice is really exhausting and not refreshing at all. That is why a lot of qigong practitioners skip it and turn to focusing on their breath. And in sitting meditation, many people turn to the natural method. Well, what can I say? Choose your own path, but do your choice. Do not switch from this to that. Never. The mind should not wander. It has to follow a path. Like I said, in my school we use the Isho Dantian method. That means that this is always there. It means that when I talk about sensations, I talk about sensations that you feel from your abdomen, not from your head. The ultimate goal. Well, there are thousands of qigong systems, and the question, of course, is about how and in what they differ. Although there are systems that claim to be good for this, and other systems that claim to be good for that, this actually is only advertisement speak for the person who is teaching. Look at me, knowing so many qigong systems, I surely must be very good. The fact is that, like I explained before, qigong means skill in qi. The only difference between all those systems is the approach they take towards that skill. An often heard argument is that one system might deliver quicker results than the other. I tend to disagree with that. It is my idea that we all differ and that what works for this person might work less or more efficient for the other. Then why do all these different styles of qigong exist? There are many reasons for this. First of all, as might be clear to you by now, persons differ, so different people create different systems. Second, but not less important to realize, our brain is a very dominant part of us and it wants to control it all. So some systems overload the brain with details by giving you specific rules and regulations. It keeps the brain satisfied. It is this brain addiction to detail that prevents us from actual Nederland training, that keeps us from sitting until we forget we exist. And in fact, all qigong, including ours, is a method with details, and these details are only there to give the brain something to play with. That all being said, it means that we are served best by a system that is relatively neutral, a system that is less pronounced in detail and that is more conceptual. The Wudang Qigong that we practice is, as I believe, such a system. So the question is, what makes this a neutral system? Actually, the answer to that question is relatively simple. I have already explained how we can envision the qi system along two approaches, a level system and the quality system. The quality system explains how we make our own qi. Let's say it explains what the machine does. The level system, on the other hand, explains how the machine is built. This level system was pictured as follows. In the center, there is the dantian, the extra meridians, the organ meridians, the capillary meridians, and skin and bone, and flesh, and so on. Now, if a qigong system works in some way with the quality system, or it works with something that belongs to one of the outer rings of the level system, then it is a specialized method that follows details of the entire qi system. If, on the other hand, a system works with the inner ring of the extra meridians, or even directly with the dantian, then it is a conceptual system. In order to understand why this is so, we can observe nature. In nature, there is water in the air, there is dampness, rainfall, dew, and so on. Let's, for the sake of being poetic, call this heavenly water. That's the dantian. Then this water comes down on earth and gathers in lakes. These lakes are the 8 extra meridians. From the lakes flow really large rivers. These are the organ meridians. After this, an irrigation system follows that is made of canals, trenches, and ditches. This irrigation system is formed by the capillary meridians. And finally, the water can irrigate the fields. These fields are skin, muscles, bone, and so on. Everything that is relatively solid and builds our physical body. Now we can clearly see how the difference between detailed and specialized versus conceptual works. If you sail on this river, then you can't sail on the other one at the same time. So you are sailing in a specialized manner. If, however, you sail on a lake, then you have access to many rivers. So you are sailing in a conceptual manner with no fixed direction, but still going somewhere. If we continue our metaphor of lakes, rivers, and so on, then of the 8 lakes that we have to our disposal to sail on, actually only 3 of them are important in qigong. They are called the renmai, the dumai, and the daimai. In order to understand why this is so, let's again take a look at nature. In this case, a mountainous area with 8 lakes. 2 of these lakes are so large and full that not only do they overflow, but by overflowing they actually fill all the other lakes. And then there is only one lake that you can only see if you fly in a plane, because it does not really exist. It is the border of all lakes and rivers together. Let's say that if the entire mountainous area is an island, then this is the border between land and sea. It holds the lakes, rivers, and ditches together as a unity. So, on the conceptual level, we have the water from heaven, 2 lakes, and the border. The water from heaven requires a simple but specialized training. Just do nothing and it will fall all by itself. That is how dantian training works. Make your mind get out of the way, become tranquil, and qi will restore itself. This is what Nederland does. However, for those amongst us that still have a life in in which the fields have to be plowed, so to speak, this is not an attainable or realistic method or life goal. The conceptual method that remains is to work with the lakes. Make sure that they are clean, that they are well filled. Make sure that the Renmai and Dumai lakes can overflow and connect so that all the other lakes are full as well. And so that the entire irrigation system will constantly provide the fields with plenty of nutritious water. This is exactly what our Wudang Qigong system does. And now comes the fun part. It does this in layers. In a moment we will go through the exercises step by step and layer by layer, and of course the ultimate goal is to directly clean up and connect the Renmai and Dumai. But that takes years of highly specialized training to achieve in a healthy manner. No worries, because when you can work with, let's continue the metaphor, the air above the lakes, then this has some pretty good results as well. Or in the terminology of our practice, instead of working with the Renmai and the Dumai, we can work with descending the yin and ascending the yang. It's just a different layer of the onion. And if we do not yet have the quality level where we can work with the air above the lakes, we can work with the mountains that the lakes are surrounded by. Or again, in the terminology of our practice, we can work with refining the physical aspects of our movement. This is why working with the Wudang Qigong system knows only advantage and no disadvantage. How cool is that? So, summing up all that has been said, 1. Isho Dantian has to be a constant during our Qigong practice. And 2. The main goal behind Wudang Qigong is the opening of the entire meridian system through the connection of the Dumai and the Renmai at a very, very high level, whilst at a lower level of practice, and in a different layer of the onion, it does so by connecting Yang and Yin. Question: if Wudang Qigong in the end facilitates the connection of Renmai and Dumai, is it then not a Neidan practice? Answer: the words practice and Neidan are conflicting terms. For true Neidan practice, you have to sit and forget you exist. Qigong, every Qigong, moves too much to be a Neidan exercise. However, Wudang Qigong can be a portal to Neidan. Now, let's turn to the exercises. Qigong, Jiming Qiwu, the name. He doesn't understand Chinese. The name of the first exercise is Jiming Qiwu. Yes, that is Chinese, and no, we are not going to use a translation of the name. The reason for that is that when we use a translation, we'll miss out on the associations that are hidden in the Chinese name and that tell us what it is that we are doing with this exercise. Jiming Qiwu would in general be translated as something like a crowing rooster gets up and dances. But like I said, in the translation we miss out on things. The first thing is the order of importance. Ji comes first, then Ming, and so on. Since Ji is the Chinese word for rooster, the translation was wrong in the first place. It should have started with rooster crowing, not a crowing rooster. If we read an ancient Taoist text, such as the Cantong Qi, we encounter a poem in which there is talk of a rooster and a hen. It is a poetical reference to Yang and Yin. A rooster is a symbolical reference to Yang Qi. So the translation should not say rooster crowing, but Yang Qi crowing. This is a bit weird, of course, so what is actually meant with crowing? Well, this is not really a hidden code or something like that. It is quite simple, really. All you have to do is to place yourself in the life of a farmer a couple of centuries ago. How do you get up in time to feed the animals? Exactly because of the crowing of the rooster. The chosen word crowing is not a description of the sound, no, it refers to a wake-up call. So now we already have a totally different translation. The Yang Qi awakens. Let us now take a look at the second part of the Chinese name, Qiwu. generally translated as getting up and dance. Indeed, the word qi, a different word qi than our qi, is often translated as getting up, like getting up in the morning. But in fact, the actual Chinese word for getting up is qi lai, not just qi. Lai means something like to go. So what does qi mean? It means that you start doing something. You start doing the work that follows. Qi is like the electrical starter in your car. It doesn't move your car, it fires up the engine so that the engine moves your car. Qi lai does not mean getting up. We translate it as such. But it actually means start to move, which in the context of getting out of your bed and beginning your day does require that you get up. And that is why we accept the wrong translation. Back to the name of our qigong. We now have the yang qi awakened and starts up to wu. What does wu mean? Poetically, it is translated as to dance, but again, this is in fact incorrect. Wu just means to energetically move, and the manner in which you do this is described by adding a word to it. Had the Chinese known of electrons, then they would have pointed to it and said, look at how they move, that is Wu. Wu. So now we have a less beautiful but more accurate idea of what the name of this exercise means. The yang qi awakens and activates movement. What does this exercise do? Actually, what this exercise does is already given away by retranslating the name. And as with all of the ancient Chinese traditions, if you know the name, then you know what it does. If you go a bit further than the superficial meaning, of course. The names of the exercises are always chosen very, very carefully and are never meant to just be poetical or something like that. They are instructions. They are teachings in themselves. In case of this exercise, we know that by performing this exercise, the yang qi awakens and activates movement. Well, sounds good, no? But what does that mean? How do you do this? First of all, we must understand something about Chinese exercises. In the West, we have a teaching tradition where you go from step 1 to step 2 and so on until you reach the final step, number 1000. The Chinese teaching tradition is totally different. You begin with step number 1000, and it is up to you to dissect it into 1000 different steps, ranging from 1 to 999. Hear what I say, it is up to you, not to the teacher. This has a lot of social and political implications and consequences, but these are for another time. Here it will suffice to notice that when we begin to practice qigong, we start with the end result without even realizing it. It is up to us to break it down into steps so that we can make progress. This means that when we want to learn to awaken the yang qi and have it activating movement, as the name of the exercise implies, we cannot start at the end. It is like climbing a ladder, we have to start at the bottom step. Facilitate the yang. The bottom step of any qigong exercise is not how to perform the movement or some other how to do this or that thing, but to understand how that, what you want to achieve, works. In this case, how do we awaken yang qi? You'll be relieved to know that this can be explained easily. In order to awaken the yang qi, we do not mess with the yang qi. Instead, we facilitate it. That's all, actually. The point is, qi circulates all by itself. Movement and making movement, in fact, is one of the basic functions of qi. So we do not have to engage ourselves with that. However, during the course of our lifetime, we do build up stagnations. They can be actual blockages. But in the modern times, I see a lot of deformations due to overusage of laptops and tablets as well. Let's compare this to a garden hose. Imagine this garden hose standing up erect with a slight weight on top. You can imagine that the weight causes the garden hose to bend and fold a bit, and the water that rises through the garden hose gets blocked or slowed down at the bends and the crooks. Another problem that you get, because of the weight on top, is that the garden hose loses some of its flexibility. It dries out, so to speak. That means that we cannot just bend it straight. That would cause new problems. We have to more or less dissect the garden hose into several parts, standing on top of one another, and place every part exactly and extremely precise on top of the lower part. So whether we are sitting or standing in our practice does not matter. What matters is that we first learn how to place the parts of our back on top of one another. Since not everybody immediately has access to a deeper sensitivity awareness, we can and must work with some rules that will, hopefully, lead us to the desired results. These rules are simple. 1. Soften the back. This means that you try to position yourself in such a manner that you can feel the muscles of the soft parts. He's going too fast. That you can feel the muscles of the soft part and have them relax and soften. Here. 2. Soften the neck. Here you try to do the same with the part of your back that starts at the top of the in-between part of the shoulder blades. You probably won't succeed in actually softening this, but that's not important. Just focus and search for it. 3. Open up the head. This means that you position the head in such a manner that it feels like the inside part of the crown ring, the fontanelles, opens up. You will know it when you achieve this because you will start to feel lightheaded. 4. Sink into the dantian. Here you try to allow the lightness on top of the head to sink down into your dantian. This is hard and difficult, but after some practice it can be done. And after number 4, you start all over again. Now, after you have gotten some practice with this, you will find that you can feel whether your spine is aligned, yes or no. And you can search to adjust it when it is not. And you maybe understand already that it is not actually the physical spine we are talking about, but the dumai. This is important to realize because of all meridians, the dumai is the master of all yang. If the above goes really, really well and the dumai fully opens, then you might notice 3 things. You will sweat on the back, but only along the left and right side of the spine, and only in tiny drops instead of gushing out the sweat. The second thing that you might notice is not pleasant at all. It feels like a really, really hot, long knitting needle is stuck through your spine from the bottom up. This is a good sign that dumai is opened, because since dumai is the master of all yang, it is the fire meridian. The third sensation of the dumai being opened up is a tingling sensation on top of the head, which will disappear as soon as you consciously notice it. So don't do that. Now we have facilitated the yang and it is flowing upward freely and all by itself. How to breathe. Qigong falls into the category of what we call internal training. And in internal training, there is the generally accepted custom to use breathing techniques. There are several reasons for this, and I have already mentioned 2 of them. The first reason has to do with the qi mechanism. Through the act of breathing, we take in the kung qi, which is an integral basic substance for the making of qi. 2. By focusing on our breath, we mislead the brain into quieting the mind. There are many other reasons for the why and how of breathing techniques, and that is why there are many different breathing techniques. In our case, 4 breathing techniques might be useful. The first breathing technique is the one you actually already did before you started Qigong. Just breathe, don't think about it. This one is the least used in Qigong, but has its own worth. Number 2 is the breathing technique that you usually learn when you start your Qigong training. The one which we call abdominal breathing. In my school, we have a number 3 right after this. We call it 3 steps breathing. It is named like this because you breathe in into the abdomen, then you pause and let the abdomen fill to its extreme. You expand, and then you breathe out. 3 phases, 3 steps. 4 is the reversed abdominal breathing. Yes, I know about other methods, such as turtle breathing and so on, but they are not relevant to our practice, not yet at least. And now I have summed up this list of techniques. Now I'm going to say none of them is important. How can that be? Well, in fact, all breathing techniques once have been invented by someone. I'm pretty sure that it has not once occurred in history that some mother told her husband, "Look at our baby, he is breathing the other way around." So breathing techniques are an invention, they are artificial. And this is a yes and a no. In fact, they are not necessarily artificial, they are tokens of goodwill of a teacher who wants to speed up the experience process of his student. The following is the case. You can practice this for yourself. Stand, or better, sit on your legs and open up your body. Free it from sensations that attract your awareness. Then just relax the mind, relax the abdomen. Just continue to breathe. Please do, otherwise you'll die. But don't breathe with a specific technique. Focus on the relaxation of the abdomen, of the dantian. If you continue this long enough, then you will find that you almost automatically fall into some pre-form of abdominal breathing. I can assure you that if you have practiced this long and intensive enough, your body will revert to abdominal breathing without you telling it to do so. So basically we use the abdominal breathing in qigong, but it is better to do this not too consciously. Of course, I am fully aware of the fact that sometimes the breathing cycle or a part of it can be very long, up to the point that you almost turn blue. There are reasons for that. In this first exercise, for instance, you might have noticed that after the first breathe in, the breathing out is continued during the arm roll and therefore takes longer. Down, continue to breathe out, and then you start breathing in. Some of the people who just start with this exercise won't even make it and will not be able to fully exhale. Still, it is taught to us that we have to do it this way. Now, if something is explicitly said about an exercise, then that is a sort of a statement. And you have often heard me say, every statement is a question. In this case, why does that breathing out have to be so long that you almost die? The reason behind this is that it is meant to make you lose control over your breathing. It is in fact the idea that you breathe out so long that the body will overtake and gasp for air all by itself. Again, this is in fact a statement. And since every statement is a question, we have to ask, why? Now we have returned to the name of this exercise, to awaken the yang qi over a larger surface than only the midline of the dumai trajectory. In the second part of this exercise, where the arms go wide, we try to spread out the rising yang over the entire back. We facilitate this by moving the arms upward in a spread out fashion, instead of just moving them upward in front of our body. And we facilitate this by a breathing boost. There are other reasons as to why this circle movement is an in-between part of the up and down movement cycle. Like I said before, one exercise consists of 1,000 steps at the same time, and it is impossible to explain them all. So let's save this for later. Climbing up the ladder. I have talked extensively with you about how we are not talking about the same thing when we, you and I, discuss qigong. We have different wants and needs, we have different levels of experience, and so on. What qigong is and what it does depends not on what you have read in books, but on what you are capable of experiencing and what you allow yourself to experience. Nevertheless, we all follow more or less the same path of development, and we can divide this development in 3 phases. When we adjust these phases to the specifics of this first exercise, they are as follows. 1. Learn to move from the muscles at the back. 2. Learn to facilitate a general rising of the arm. 3. Open the domain. It means that if we want to travel to a destination, then we have to follow a first this, then that pathway. Otherwise, we just be wandering around aimlessly. Physical. The first step that I mentioned was learn to move with the muscles from the back. The reason behind this is simple. Eventually, we want all layers to cooperate, and the physical layer is the first one we encounter. Therefore, in our beginning phase, we want to learn to work with the muscles that follow the same trajectory as the chi pathways that we'll want to work with later on. How to stand. This begins with being very precise in how you stand. There are basically two positions that we can choose from. The horse riding position and the inverted horse riding position. The trademarks of the horse riding position are that you feel like if you sit on and goes faster. Sit on and in between your legs. The legs have to be able to relax in the groin and on the inside over the full length of the legs. In order to be able to do this, the feet have to stand parallel to one another. Not tiptoeing outward, but parallel. How high or how low you sit is not really relevant unless you have a specific reason to go higher or lower. A side example is the fire training, where you sit so low that your hip joint is at the same height as your knee. But this is not necessary for qigong and will in fact only distract. The inverted horse riding position is a little bit more difficult. Here the feet are pointed towards one another and together they almost form a capital T. Yes, I am aware of the third position where the feet point outwards. You will never find this position in a Chinese art and we consider it a no-go area. Why is that? Why these three positions? It all has to do with what you are training, and if you are already relatively sensitive, then you'll be able to feel what I mean. When you allow the feet to spread, you can feel your centerline awareness sinking into the groin and the inside of the hip joints. You'll only want this when you are training something very special, like for instance when you have some disease where the yin is deficient. Now if you, from the above open position, turn both your feet forward until they are parallel, then you may feel your awareness in the center line of the body going a bit higher. The legs are still open on the inside, but there is also a slight dantian awareness. And if we turn the feet towards one another in the inverse horse stance, then there will be only dantian. The legs will be burning, this is true, but sensation-wise we will only be working with the dantian. In the first 4 exercises of Wudang Qigong, we sit in the horse riding posture. Mark my words, they are chosen very carefully. Do not stand in a horse riding position, but sit. You do this by placing your feet in an acceptably wide position, point the feet forward and placing them parallel to one another. Then you align your ears above your shoulders, above your hip joints and above your ankles, and you just drop your body whilst keeping the legs relaxed. The movement. In the first 4 exercises, the legs and arms actually are no part of the exercise. Yes, the arms move, I know, and I'll get to that in a moment. For now, it is important to know that they are no part of the goal of the exercise and therefore of the exercise. That being said, they have to move very, very precise, not only physically, but mentally as well. In order to understand what is going on here, let's look at an old school water pump. You know, the type that you see in cowboy movies. To get water from the pump, you'll have to heave the bar and move it up and down. Since there is not yet any water to move, this will be quite heavy to do. This compares very well to our first stage in qigong, where we are totally working on physical level. Then we get to a point that there is water coming from the pump, not in spurts, but in a nice continuous flow. Here we do not have to use force anymore. We only have to adapt our pumping speed to the speed of the water. At the third level, the water flow is so powerful that we do not have to move the bar at all. Instead, the bar is moving us. These are the three stages our qigong development can lead us to and through. The external principles. Now, in order to get that water flowing up and through the pump, the pump has to be clean on the inside. No blockages. When we bring this comparison back to our body, this means that our movement has to be free from stagnation. There are two types of stagnation. Stagnation of the mind and stagnation of the body. The stagnation of the mind is being dissolved by our practice of Isho Dantian. The stagnation of the body we can dissolve by improving the precision of our movement. With precision, I do not mean that the arms have to move exactly in such an angle or things like that. No, it means that you have to move in such a manner that you do not feel that you are moving, since every sensation is a stagnation. On the physical level, we can use rules of movement to achieve this. In this case, there is what I call the external principle, as I have described in my book. I'm talking about the seventh principle, the principle of the hollow pipe, which in short is explained as where's my book? If the torso rotates, the upper arm rotates the book. And that is what I mean. So if the torso rotates, the upper arm rotates. You can practice as a separate exercise. Now a torso rotation is not only around a vertical axis. It can be around a horizontal axis as well. And this is exactly what we do in the first qigong exercise. By making an upward wave-like motion with our back, we actually rotate the chest part around a horizontal axis. At the same time, we rotate the upper arm. Eventually, by using this technique, you try to achieve that the arm does not move independently and that the shoulder joints do not get blocked on the inside while moving the arms up. You may have noticed that I mentioned a wave-like motion of the back. The combination of this wave-like upward motion with the upward movement of the arms gives free space in the back so that the yang qi can rise. I could have said that it pulls up the yang qi, but that would have been wrong. We do not push or pull, we facilitate. Feel it, don't show it. As it is a journey of 1,000 steps, we have to start somewhere. And in qigong, this is the general movement of the exercise. Now the yang qi rises over the back. When our awareness, not so fast. When our awareness improves, we might, what is it doing? It's doing crazy stuff. When our awareness improves, this is what I wanted to say, we might notice that it rises through the domain. But even then, it still rises over the back in general. So how do we improve our awareness? It is best to start in a very physical manner. Make an upward movement with the back and continue to practice this until you not only can throw your arms upward as a consequence of the upward flowing movement, but also until you can feel the action of the back at the same time over the entire back. Remember, a sensation should be equally spread out over a surface as large as possible. Then, over the course of time, you refine this up to the point where you still can feel the wave, but somebody watching you cannot see you do it. This is what we call feel it, don't show it. It is a very, very important training principle that in Tai Chi is called the secret of one tsun. A tsun is a measure comparable to our old measure of a thumb, and it is considered to be very small. The meaning of the saying is that you are big, that you start making big, wide, large movements, but you end up being able to do them small and hardly visible. Linear. After you have learned the movement, and now it should scroll up. After you have learned the movement and you have practiced it for some time, you might get warm hands. Whether this is nice or not is totally unimportant. It is just one of those 1,000 steps. Now you try to move in such a manner that you can feel this warmth not only in your hands, but through the entire arm and maybe even in your body. Since our bodies are linear, we call this a linear sensation. Those who have practiced the wide standing position that is intended to open up the Chungmai, the center meridian, can transport the requirements of that standing position into this qigong exercise and might even feel a connection going from the soles of the feet to the palms of the hand and the top of the head. It feels like lines through your body as the matchstick man we used to draw as children. Feel. If all the lines are open and we can feel them, we get access to field training. No, not training outside in the field, but being aware of a field-like sensation. On the other hand, there are other methods to get there as well. And the following one might be very helpful. Imagine two balls. One is in front of you and you are hanging over it. The other one is surrounding you like an eggshell. Now we are going to play with them in 3 ways. First, hang over the ball in front of you and try to feel how it is being compressed. There. After that, feel how it wants to expand, how it actually expands and how by expanding it blows your arms out. You don't actively move them up, no, they are being forced up by the expansion of the ball you're hanging over. Then you fall down, over the ball, and you repeat. Second, press against the ball surrounding you in a very slow and gentle manner. Feel it building up tension and wanting to contract. Before it pops, you can't go too far, before it pops, you give in and allow your arms to be pushed inward. Before you lose the sensation of this field, you move back, press against it again, and so on. Then there is the third exercise. Here we combine the two. First we hang over the ball and allow our arms to be pushed outward. Then we feel them floating outward against the field surrounding us. That field extends, builds up pressure and pushes our arms back inward, floating towards the inner ball, and so on. We bounce from the one to the other. Yes, I know this is difficult. Yes, I know that it feels so good. Totally not important. Don't get addicted to it. Do not cling to the step of the ladder. Let go of it and let's continue. Now we have acquired the sensitivity where we can bounce between the ball and the field. So we go to the next step, the in-between. Where you first have gone through all this exercise to become aware of the ball and the field, now you try to continuously move in between the two in such a manner that you do not feel any of them. Stay where it feels light. When you're at the level where you can actually feel what I'm talking about, then you can also feel how the shape of this first movement allows the yang qi to rise over the entire back. Spiraling. This is a very advanced awareness and requires not only linear and field awareness sensitivity, but also something that we have to train for through a separate exercise called fire standing. This position is not meant to practice until you can hold it for 20 minutes or so, it is meant to be heavy. It is meant to be burning, to make you feel physically heating up. It is not pleasant. Why so fast? It is not pleasant. We are miles away from feeling happy, happy, joy, joy. It is hot and it hurts the legs like hell. Now, when you combine this sensation of heating up with your linear experience and with your field experience, then something weird happens. It starts to feel like if your skin boils away from the flesh and muscles. And this is exactly what we want, because now we can become aware of the empty space between skin and flesh. And while doing our exercises, we can feel movement through this empty space. And if we move correctly, this movement feels like if it spirals. Actually, it doesn't spiral at all. It is a sign that the qi is becoming still and whole, and our movement is spiraling around it. And of course, this is something to use as a stepping stone towards a next level step, but for now, let's leave it at this. Variations of practice. Depending on what you want from it, there are several ways to practice. And now we go off chart. In the qigong, there is of course the ordinary qigong, where you practice for health, you facilitate the circulation of qi, and so on and so on. Like I explained before, there are three types of exercises: Neidan, Neikong, qigong. There are more types of exercises like Daoyin and so on, but now we're talking within the same branch, and then the Neidan, where you actually do nothing to become nothing. The Neikong, where you do as little as possible to achieve as much as possible in the world. And qigong, where you just want to be happy, open, and so on. And you can actually, apart from Neidan, you can, because Neidan, like I previously explained, Neidan requires not doing anything. So qigong, with all its movements and breathing in, breathing out, and feeling this, feeling that, that's way too much to work with for Neidan. In Neidan, you just sit or stand if you prefer, or lie down, or whatever you like, and empty the mind. And that emptiness, allow it to spread out through the entire body, become nothing. That's what Neidan is trying to achieve. Now the qigong, like I said, there are ways to practice. We have the gentle practice like you have been taught. Why? Because of the facilitating of the qi circulation. But you can use it in a muscular fashion as well. And then you start with the muscles of the genitals and the perineum and the anus, and you tense them up, and it's like your body consists of rings, muscle rings, and you tense them up one by one, like a tube of toothpaste. You squeeze yourself, and then you tense up all these muscles, and then you will notice that the arms, because you tense them as well, I can hardly speak, you tense up all into the towards the fingertips, and then you go back, you relax in the same direction, and then you tense up again, and the arms will go all by themselves. You hardly have to shape the movement. If you practice it in this manner, then it's very good for the Neidan, the Neikong interpretation, and you can use it as an iron shield for your martial arts, stuff like that, which can be achieved by an ordinary practice of qigong as well, just breathing in, breathing out. But then you have to be more precise and active in your breathing. There is where we always practice the gentle way of qigong. There's also the explosive way, where you go If somebody is standing next to you, he or she should faint if you do that. All openness, feel it, the entire system going open, out of the head, through the feet into the earth, out of the palms. You should radiate. And the sound is going down into the center, not out. Yes, I know that the sound goes out, but where you feel it, where out your awareness goes down into the abdomen and out. So you can practice qigong with weights. Not the bodybuilding weights, but the iron rings. And then you can really search for precision in your movement. Like I said before, gravity is your friend. So you do not want gravity to pull your arm down. So you move in between the gravity and then you allow it to sink down through the body. Constantly through the body, out and back, down. So there are many ways to practice qigong. How fast or how slow do you go? For health's sake and for our practice, the average speed is good. If you want to go towards the Neikung and maybe even towards the Neidan eventually, then you have to slow down. Really slow down. So I never count during practice with you, but we go in, out, in, out. Let's say this takes 10 seconds. Yes, that gives us 6 exercises a minute. Yes, and that's actually quite fast. Try to slow down so that breathing in is the measure. Breathing in takes half a minute. And that takes some practice. I can do it. I'm making you do it. I'm not going to do that. But that's where you slow down the system and you really get rid of internal stagnations. But sometimes it helps to push a stagnation out of the way and then you go faster. You just move. As long as there is no movement in the arm itself, it should be the entire body. So if one thing moves, everything moves. So constant pulse of movement. You see me sitting down because you can do the qigong sitting down as well. Why stand? You are sitting on your legs anyway, so now I'm sitting on a chair. That's somebody else's legs. That's a borrowed legs. But what I'd like to say is there are many ways of qigong. There is, in our case, this one method, the Wudang qigong, but there are so many ways in which you can practice, and it all depends on the goal. And of course, very important, on the time you have. If you have like a family, a busy job, things like that, then don't think about all these things. Don't worry about them. Pick one and do that. And if you have ideas of wanting to really improve and delve into the qigong and so on, well, you will find that things will come and that you will change your life eventually so that you actually can practice, because this is what she does. It connects yin and yang, search for connection to one another. They never will connect, but they are searching for it. And that also means that if you are clear about what you practice, how you practice, why you practice, then the surroundings will adapt to that, because that's a yin-yang relation as well. With that, I leave you. I hope you picked something out of this for your practice. And well, we did not dissect the exercise exactly from follow this path and follow that path. No, because that's not important. You have to have this general understanding of why you practice, why do you do this exercise. So the conclusion, it's the yang qi over the back. in levels. The level that we can achieve is the general yang rising over the entire body. If we continue to practice and we sublime our practice, then eventually we can narrow it down to only working with the do mind. But that takes a lot of intense practice, specialized practice, and well, isolated practice. Not the practice isolated, you practice isolated. So that's not for everybody, but just step by step, 1,000 steps, and if you continue to walk, eventually you'll get there. For now, I wish you a good night. Thank you for being here and for having the patience to hear me out, and I wish you stay safe, stay healthy.